Okay, so it's UKSG day one. I've just had a very civilised start to the day. I've practiced my presentation. I've got my presentation this afternoon at 2:30. So I practiced that and then spent a bit of time sorting out getting ready for the conference, working out what schedule I've got today, and then went for a nice relaxed breakfast down at the hotel restaurant. And I've just put my waterproof jacket on because it's absolutely chucking it down. So I'm going to go and brave the weather and go and get drenched. Fortunately, the conference venue is only 4 minutes walk away according to Google Maps. So fingers crossed I don't get lost, and hopefully I get there without looking too much like a drowned rat. So see you later. So I've survived the first day of the UKSG conference. It's really interesting actually. I'll be back later to update in a bit more detail about each of the sessions that I attended today. But I had a really good day, really enjoyed the plenary sessions, I gave my workshop, which we had a lot of people come to that session, and we had some really good questions and feedback afterwards, which was really nice. And then I explored the exhibition for a little while, went around, got some entered some prize draws, got chatting to some of the exhibitors about some of the things that they've been working on, and had a really good time. I'm exhausted. I'm kind of just rushed back to my hotel, got changed, and I'm off out to the quiz night now. But I'll check in later tonight with a little bit more detail about some of the sessions that I attended today and what were the kind of main take-home points for me from those ones. So see you in a bit. Okay, so it's the first evening after UKSG. I'm just back from the quiz. Didn't do very well in the quiz. Found it really hard. Wasn't my sort of quiz really, but you know, it was an okay evening. And we had lots of retro sweets, which is always a good thing. But I just wanted to provide an overview of my sort of initial thoughts of some of the sessions from today. So started out this morning with a series of the kind of keynotes from the morning. There were 3 sessions in the main hall with everyone together. Before we had that, we had award ceremonies, and it was great actually to see that there were so many new professionals and early career professionals were supported, and also that some of the people from local further education colleges were able to attend as well. When I was a student, I was fortunate enough to be able to attend some conferences thanks to sponsorship and students' awards, and I found that really useful. So it's great to see that there's more of that continuing, and there were loads of people who were able to attend UKSG because of that sponsorship. So that was really good to see. And then we got into the main sessions. So the first one was Anne Rossiter from Sconnell. I've heard Anne speak before and chatted to Anne about different things, and I wasn't really sure what to expect from his session actually, but I thought it was great. It was really thought-provoking, quite strong. I think a lot of people were quite surprised at the messages that she was giving across and how strong she was about those messages, but I think it was necessary, and I think it was really helpful. She got a round of applause at one point during her session. But some of the things that Anne highlighted were really interesting actually. So most of us who work within the academic library arena are familiar with Sconnell stats. One of my very first roles as a graduate trainee was collecting the Sconnell statistics on the inquiries that we had and various different things. So many of us are familiar with Sconnell stats, love them or hate them. But they're really useful in terms of being able to kind of check trends over time and also for benchmarking purposes. But one of the interesting things that Anne was able to present was an overview of how things have changed in the academic library area over the last few years. So, for example, she pointed out 3 key facts that I noted down. The first one was that library spaces are busier than ever. The second one was that libraries are being asked to do more to support a wider range of institutional priorities. And the third one was that libraries retain their traditional roles in supporting students. So she was kind of highlighting the fact that although things have changed in terms of content being provided electronically rather than physically, actually a lot of the things that libraries are being asked to do is very much the same. And in some cases there's an increased demand from users in terms of the support that the library can provide. However, with that, unfortunately, the budget hasn't changed, or if anything, has decreased. It certainly hasn't increased in many cases in academic libraries, and a lot of the time per FTE it's much less than it has been over the last few years. But the spend on content has increased, and so obviously that creates quite a problem, and so the way that most libraries have been dealing with that is a reduction in staff numbers or staff hours. But I think, as Anne correctly pointed out, there's only so much cutting that can be done, and I think we're kind of at crunch point at the moment in that area. And it was some kind of hard facts, but I think it's common sense and it's something that many of us already are aware of. And it's not sustainable, and so Anne kind of talks about some of the different ways that we might want to combat that, and some of the ways that libraries and publishers can help each other out a little bit more and work a little bit more effectively. So some of those are really simple things, and I always really like it when it's simple things. For example, just being a little bit more upfront about what exactly authors can do with their publications. So in terms of when they've been receive a letter to say that they've been accepted for publication, knowing exactly what it is their policy is in terms of open access and things like that. So that's a fairly straightforward thing that could be implemented, but could actually save a lot of staff time in terms of the academics, and also in terms of other staff within that institution who wouldn't then have to check the policy. So some of those things, but I think also she then kind of talks a lot more about the real need to embrace open access as something that needs to be accepted as a business model, and she kind of highlighted a sort of call to action for publishers to embrace open access. She kind of used the metaphor of not having your head in the sand like an ostrich, and she highlighted, that publishers need to get on board with this and embrace this, otherwise they face becoming extinct essentially. So suffering in a similar way that to companies like Nokia, because they weren't willing to innovate at the right stage. So Anne's talk was really quite thought-provoking, as I say, quite very strong and really clear message. So it was a good start to the day. And then we had a session from Michael Drubb, who is a consultant on open access. And it was quite interesting. I don't know that much about open access policies. It's not something that I've worked with directly. Obviously, I'm aware of the variety of different policies and some of the tools that can help people with that. And aware of things like Sherpa and Romeo, which are sort of JISC funded projects that help with that. But I'm not actually involved in anything like that in my day job. So it was quite interesting to hear about how much variation there is between those policies, and the fact that they also change very frequently. They're difficult to understand, and in some cases difficult to find them. I think he highlighted the fact that there was 447 open access policies across Europe. So just a nightmare to kind of try and help with that. And he also highlighted the fact that different terminology was being used, and there's a real need to use the same language in terms of publishers, in terms of libraries, and in terms of funders. He also kind of highlighted some research around UK authors and their preferences, and highlighted some stuff, for example, that they seem to show a preference for publishing in hybrid journals. I was a little bit unsure as to the reasons behind that. I'm not sure whether that's as much of a sort of conscious choice to publish in hybrid journals, or if that's just the journal that they're used to publishing in, or the journal that they have experience with, or the journal that they read. So I'm sure there's a lot more to the research than was presented, but it was interesting nonetheless. And I think the main kind of take-home point from that one was that in general UK take-up of open access is significantly ahead of the kind of world average, and also it's growing fast. So he emphasised the fact that we should take that as a positive thing. And then the final session within that section of the day was Charlie Rappel, who was presenting about reputation particularly for researchers. And it was really interesting presentation and lots of interesting data, and the way that she presented her slides was really clear as well, and it kind of satisfied those of us who love stats, but didn't scare off anyone who didn't. And she had really nice ways of explaining about skewing of data and different tests and when you might use different tests, but without having to go into too much detail, but giving enough information to explain why certain analysis was done. So I thought that was really good, and some of the kind of key messages around that, and it was all about sort of reputation and how academics can build their reputation, and how they try to build their reputation, and what they think works and what doesn't, and what they put their efforts into. She did a series of, so they did a survey where people were able to sort of rank the options of what they did to increase their reputation and which things they felt contributed most. And they also did some open interviews about what people do, and they said that the findings varied slightly on that. So it seems that perhaps when they're given a list of things, they kind of say, oh yeah, well, yeah, I do that. So for example, I do conferences, and I speak about my research, but when asked open questions, they perhaps don't mention those things as much. Maybe it's taken as a given, or just something that they don't mention. And also that they do tend to talk about the fact that they use social media, but actually when they're asked to rank it, they actually consider that potentially contributes less directly to their reputation, but that it still has an impact. I thought so Charlie kind of presented some of the research and talked and presented some quotes from researchers, which was really interesting from the interviews. But one of the kind of key final messages and the key findings from that research, there were a couple of things that I noted. The first was how surprised they were that many of the researchers were sharing their work via Facebook. They weren't necessarily expecting to see Facebook as one of the main places for sharing the work, but they did find that. However, engagement was higher on LinkedIn, so people actually clicking through to find out more information on the research. And then one thing that was really interesting that I'd like to get a bit more information on actually was the fact that attention can drive action. So generating attention into research can actually result in an increase in downloads. And there was some research that she presented on that showed that 23% increase in downloads when researchers proactively explain and show their work. So when they're bringing attention to their work, it actually does result in an increase in downloads. And they compared that to a control group who weren't proactively doing that promotion. So that I thought was a really key, strong message to be able to help institutions be able to go and support their researchers and helping them understand the value of doing that. Then after that we had lunch, which was really good actually. It was hot food, and there were all allergies were catered to, so I got to have a nice hot gluten-free meal, but there was also dairy-free and vegan options, and it was really good food. No puddings sadly for me, but that's normally the case at conferences, and it was great to have a hot meal. Then after lunch, I went to a breakout session on... Oh, first I went around the exhibition for a little while, which was really good. Really enjoyed chatting to the exhibitors throughout the day. And then there was a breakout session I went to on MOOCs, and particularly around copyright of licensing content, particularly readings for online courses. And so that was quite interesting because I have studied MOOCs, a number of different MOOCs on different platforms, and I've actually used the services that they were talking about. So it was Michael Healy from Copyright Agency, I think. I forget his workplace, but something to do with the copyright. And Heather Staines, who was from SIPEX, which is the Stanford Intellectual Property Exchange. And SIPEX is something that I've used as a student on a MOOC, and I've got access to resources via that way. And so it was interesting to kind of hear more about how they provide access and how they support both the people who are providing the courses, the authors, and also the students, and talked about the kind of growth of MOOCs, and a little bit about the stats in terms of how many readings and what sort of readings, and the fact that it's a mixture of journals and books, that there's normally an average of sort of around 10. I think they said it was a mean of around 12 and a median of 9 different readings per course, but also commenting on the fact that the courses initially were sort of 18 months in length and now are slightly shorter, so they're normally sort of a number of weeks rather than a number of months. So potentially some trends around MOOCs, which is something that I'm interested in both as a learner, a perpetual learner. I think I'll always be studying in some senses, but also as someone who provides training for people as well. So it's quite interesting for me to consider that as someone who provides webinars and potentially sort of training in the future. So that was really good. Then it was my session that I was facilitating with Joe Lambert and Graham Stone, and it was packed actually. All the seats were taken by 5 minutes before we started, so we had quite a lot of people standing at the back of the room. And then I think it went okay. We had lots of people making notes throughout, lots of people typing notes, and it's always really great when in an audience you look out on an audience and you can kind of see people having sort of realizations and going, oh yeah. So we shared some examples of how what sort of questions you can answer with the data that's available to you via things like JUST, which is journal usage stats, and IRIS, which is repository usage stats, but also how you can combine that with the different sources of data to help you answer questions such as does discovery service implementation impact usage of our journals, how are the items in our repository being used, what do we do about this new deal, do we choose to subscribe to the same deal or change our deal, what can we look at the use of gold open access and green open access, and can we bring that data together, also all sorts of different ways that you can use data, and we kind of discuss some of those examples that have already happened, and also some potential things that could happen in future with bringing together data on APCs as well. As well as learning analytics and some other different sources. So it was really interesting to hear from other people after the session as well. So some people asked some questions and raised some comments and ideas in the session, and then we had some people who kind of come to ask us about it afterwards. So yeah, it was a good session. I enjoyed it, and I got to practice my storytelling, which is something that I'm trying to do more of. So it was a useful opportunity for me to kind of share, not necessarily my own stories, but share other people's stories about how they use data. So I found it quite useful to practice presenting in that way. And I've got it again tomorrow, so even more practice. After that, I chose to spend the rest of the afternoon in the exhibition. So I spent a bit of time going around. I always love going to the exhibition. The last kind of few conferences that I've been to, I spent quite a bit of time walking around the exhibition, just to kind of find out what's going on. And even though I'm not directly involved in working, I'm not directly involved in purchasing resources, for example, or services or anything like that, but I think it's really useful to kind of know what's going on in the sector, and what the kind of key changes are and trends and priorities and stuff. So I like to just go up to the stands and just ask people what they've been working on recently, and ask them what their kind of key new developments in their company or business or organisation have been. So I found that really interesting. So I had some really good chats and conversations, and I also did a bit of colouring in, which is nice, and hooked a turtle and won a £5 Amazon voucher. But it was just really nice to meet people and chat to people. And then that took me to the end of the afternoon, and then I had a very quick turnaround before the quiz. So as you can probably tell, I'm in my pyjamas right now. It's gone midnight. I'm kind of exhausted. I need to get some rest before tomorrow. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. It's a bit of an earlier start. It starts at 9 tomorrow, with a session on ethnographic research methods from Donna Langcliffe. So I'm looking forward to that. I always like to hear her speak. And ethnographic research is an area that I'm interested in, and I'd love to be able to get involved in some research in that sense. So there's a few sessions tomorrow that I'm really interested in about some potential research methods that I'd really like to try to get involved in the future. So I'm really looking forward to that. And obviously I'll have the repeat of our breakout session tomorrow afternoon as well. and then after that I can relax a little bit more and enjoy the conference dinner tomorrow night, hopefully. But yeah, day one done. It was a good day. Really enjoyed it, but really tired now, so gonna get some sleep. So see you tomorrow. Bye.